In 1860, a razorback pig that was being loaded onto a boat bound for a Cincinnati pork packing plant made a wild bid for freedom. Abandoning its unfortunate porcine pals, it leaped over the boat rail and made the short swim across the Tug Fork River from Kentucky to West Virginia. Over the next 48 years, at least 60 people died as a result. The pig, you see, was the property of Randolph Old Ranald McCoy. When it swam across the river, it entered the land of William Devil Anse Hatfield, whose men captured the pig by chasing it into a ravine. When old Ranald sent word that he wanted the pig back, Devil Anse replied, "If you think you have boys enough, why don't you come and get the old pig?" Finders keepers, so it seems. And that reportedly was the start of it all. Not long after, 3 McCoy boys, aged 10 to 20, were across the river in West Virginia when they encountered some boys from the Hatfield clan. Things escalated quickly. There was a fight, and one of the Hatfields was left dead with 31 stab wounds. In retaliation, the Hatfield clan captured the 3 McCoys, took them to a secluded spot, tied them to trees, and shot them execution style. From then on, intermittently across the next 5 decades, violence begat vengeance, and vengeance begat violence. Sons and daughters of both households met cruel and untimely ends, and no one stopped the madness. No one stopped going out of their way to do harm. In the words of a quote often misattributed to Mahatma Gandhi, "An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind." The actual origin of the quote is uncertain, but its truth is certainly borne out by the sad example, the Hatfields and the McCoys. Now, in stark contrast to the terrible feud I have just described, we have the words of Jesus, taken from the Sermon on the Plain in Luke's Gospel. "I say to you that listen, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also, and from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." Now that sounds nice and worthy of aspiration, but it can be an awfully big ask because Jesus does not speak of small offenses. Those who hate you, those who curse you, those who abuse you, these are not exactly lovable people. In fact, Jesus acknowledges as much. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? I feel certain that, for the most part, McCoys loved the McCoys, and the Hatfields loved the Hatfields. But how in the world are you supposed to love someone you just don't like? In fact, someone who causes you hurt. Well, I think it's helpful if we first make a distinction. Love, as Jesus is describing it, is not a feeling. It is an action, a decision, an orientation toward the world. And what Jesus is teaching is that love, properly understood, is not conditional or transactional. It does not depend upon the actions of the other. Jesus is saying no matter what others may do, respond from a place of love. Now, this is not the same as condoning offenses, but it is uncoupling our response from the actions of another. We do not respond sometimes from a place of resentment, and sometimes from a place of vengeance, sometimes from a place of anger, sometimes from a place of outrage, and sometimes from a place of love. Instead, Jesus counsels, endeavor always to respond from the place of love. Now, I'm using that language repeatedly, respond from the place of, to enforce that love does not originate in the actions or decisions of the other. It originates in our actions and our decisions. It is a responding out of our better selves and not out of our lesser selves. It is a resisting of evil by doing good. Return no one evil for evil. And this decision to reside in and to respond from the place of love is described by the psalmist. Trust in the Lord and do good, so you will live in the land and enjoy security. Take delight in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him, and He will act. Be still before the Lord. Refrain from anger. Forsake wrath. Do not fret. It only leads to evil. Yet a little while, and the wicked will be no more. But the meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant prosperity. So you hear the counsel of the psalmist. Live in God's love, trust in God's love, delight in God's love, immerse yourselves in God's love. If you endeavor to do these things always, then you will grow to respond from the place of love. Now, all that sounds good in theory and on paper. But how is it lived out in reality and in the world? Well, I'd suggest that we don't have to look very far to find a real-life example in one of Grace's mission partners. Many of you have had the opportunity to visit and will recognize this stone from the Tent of Nations, which is a Palestinian farm in the hills southwest of Bethlehem. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the story, the farm is owned by the Nasser family and has been registered to the family since 1916. The land on which the Tent of Nations exists was declared state land by the Zionist Israeli government in 1991 in an ongoing effort to confiscate Palestinian-held land for Israeli settlements. And while the land around the farm was swallowed up by the Gush Etzion settlement block, the Nasser family has been able thus far to withstand legal challenges because of the more than 100-year-old deed that they hold. The legal document has not prevented the Israeli government from repeatedly bulldozing the family's olive trees, cutting all electric utilities to the farm, and engaging in decades of harassing tactics. In addition, the Nasser brothers, Daoud and Daher, have recently been released from the hospital after being violently attacked by some Palestinian neighbors from a nearby town, either out of jealousy or because the neighbors are in pay of the Israeli settlers. Now, it would certainly be a bridge too far to ask the Nasser family not to have deep anger at the destruction of their property, not to feel any resentment toward those who threaten their livelihood, or who seek to steal what is rightfully theirs, or who have caused them serious physical harm. I'm sure the Nasser family feels all of those emotions. They have not responded from the place of their anger. They have not reacted from the place of their resentment. They have, as the stone says, refused to be enemies, even to those who act as enemies. And instead, they have responded from a place of love. Doing so doesn't mean that they must be best friends with those who have done them harm, or that they must be indifferent to the harm that has been done. But they have not responded in kind. They have not returned evil for evil. Instead, they have sought partnership with those who can assist them in doing good. Reaching beyond their enemies and reaching out to the world, they have formed a partnership with those who support their vision and their cause. Their website reads, "At Tent of Nations, our call is to change hearts and to build a bridge between people and the land. We invite people to come to the farm to see, and then to go and tell our story of faith and hope and love." When their olive trees have been bulldozed, they have responded with international help by replanting. Where their neighbors have chosen violence, they have sought and taught peace. They have chosen in the counsel of the psalm not to fret because of the wicked, and they have forsaken wrath. Even in those cases where they cannot be friends, they have refused to be enemies. Love in the face of evil is not weakness. Love in the face of evil is resistance. So what are we to learn from the ongoing efforts of the Nasser family? They have uncoupled their response to their would-be enemies from their emotions, and they have instead grounded their response in their values and their beliefs. They have held firm in their faith in God, and they have not undertaken this alone. In fact, they could not undertake this alone. They have sought the support of others in promoting the good that they value. Now, I'd suggest to you that what I've just described is what we, in fact, seek to do each week in our worship, our fellowship, and our study. We seek to learn the way of love, to cultivate the way of love, to encourage one another in the way of love. It doesn't happen by accident or through casual experiences once in a while. We seek to ground ourselves in God. And we strive together and with God's help and guidance to become our best selves and not to surrender to our lesser selves. Every time we speak or act, we give life to something. If we act from the place of our resentment, we give life to resentment. If we act from the place of our violent impulses, we give life to violence and we take refuge in its instruments and in its tools. If we act from the place of love, we give life to love. In the end, our neighbors do not choose what type of neighbors we will act as. We choose what type of neighbor we will be. And we can live as Hatfields to our McCoy neighbors, or we can refuse to be enemies no matter what. Nobody said it was easy. But Jesus said it is our calling. Trust in the Lord and do good. Amen.